I tracked my stolen sedan through every back alley in the city, but I never expected it to be hidden right under my nose. When I ripped the tarp off in my brother's locked garage, the engine was still warm. Family loyalty died the second I saw his grease-stained hands. The night I found my stolen car in my brother's garage, my parents were 2 neighborhoods away, accepting an award for raising what the banquet program called a family of uncommon integrity. I was supposed to be there. My mother had assigned me a seat behind a decorative column, beside the service door, where the photographers would not accidentally include me in the family pictures. Instead, I was standing in the dark behind my brother's house with rain soaking through my shoes, a locksmith's invoice folded in my coat pocket, and a location signal pulsing on my phone. The signal had stopped moving 12 minutes earlier. It was coming from inside his locked garage. I had spent 3 days tracking my stolen sedan through parking structures, industrial streets, and narrow alleys where the buildings had no windows. I had followed every alert from the manufacturer's recovery system, never getting close enough to see the car before the signal disappeared again. But I knew this house. I had helped my brother choose it. I had reviewed the closing documents when our parents claimed they were too busy to understand the paperwork. I had caught a tax proration error that saved him almost $4,000. He never thanked me. Now, through the narrow window in the side door, I could see the curved outline beneath a gray tarp. My car had a distinctive rear spoiler. Low, subtle, factory installed. The shape beneath the tarp had the same one. I called the police before I touched anything. Then I called the locksmith, whose number was still saved from the time my brother locked himself out during his housewarming party and blamed me for taking too long to arrive. The officer reached the house first. He was young, careful, and visibly uncomfortable when I explained whose garage it was. "Are you certain the tracking system is accurate?" he asked. I held out my phone. The pulsing dot sat directly over the detached garage. Then I showed him the ownership file I had already prepared. Registration, purchase agreement, insurance card, vehicle identification number, recovery system account, and the police report from the morning the car vanished. Organized, tabbed, complete. That was the advantage of spending 9 years as a title compliance specialist. People thought my job was about forms. It was really about claims. Who claimed ownership? Who had authority? Who had signed? Who had lied? The locksmith opened the side door under the officer's supervision. The smell reached us first: warm engine oil, damp concrete, metal. The officer lifted the tarp. There it was, my dark blue sedan. The rear plate had been removed. A temporary paper tag sat crookedly in the back window. One headlight was missing. The chrome emblem had been pried from the trunk. But the scratch beside the fuel door was mine. So was the small crack in the right taillight. The officer touched the hood. Still warm. A sound came from the house. The back door opened. My brother stepped into the rain wearing black dress pants, an open white shirt, and grease-stained gloves. He stopped when he saw us. For 1 second, nobody spoke. Then he looked at me with the same expression he had worn throughout our childhood whenever something broke, and he needed time to decide how it had become my fault. "What are you doing here, Julia?" My name is Julia Rowan. I was 31 years old that night. I worked for a regional title company reviewing ownership histories, lien releases, signatures, and fraud indicators before real estate transactions closed. My brother, Grant, was 34 and described himself online as an entrepreneur. Our parents described him as visionary. Banks described him differently, although I would not learn the full vocabulary until later. Grant glanced at the officer, then at the uncovered car. His face did not collapse. That would have been too honest. Instead, he smiled. It was a small, practiced smile designed to suggest that everyone else had misunderstood something simple. "This looks bad," he said. The officer stared at his gloves. Grant slowly removed them. "I can explain. Family loyalty did not die in a dramatic burst that night. It ended like a signature being compared beneath bright light. One line looked familiar. The next did not. And once the difference appeared, I could not stop seeing it. Growing up, Grant had been the photograph. I had been the person asked to hold the camera. My mother, Patricia, cared deeply about how our family appeared from a distance. She coordinated our clothes for holiday pictures. She rewrote birthday captions until they sounded as though we lived in constant gratitude. She removed comments that suggested conflict. My father, Russell, cared about status in quieter ways. He remembered the square footage of other people's homes. He noticed watches. He liked introducing Grant as our business owner and me as the one who handles paperwork. They said I had always been difficult. What they meant was that I remembered things. I remembered that Grant had taken the cash from my 6th grade fundraiser envelope before my mother accused me of losing it. I remembered that he had dented our father's truck and parked it so the damage faced the fence. I remembered that my college savings account had somehow paid for part of Grant's failed restaurant, although my parents called that a family decision. Facts made people uncomfortable when appearances depended on forgetting them, so I became the scapegoat. Grant made mistakes because he was ambitious. I noticed them because I was bitter. Grant borrowed because he believed in himself. I asked for repayment because I lacked generosity. By the time I was 24, I had stopped arguing. I built a life with clean boundaries, automatic locks, and records stored in duplicate. The car was the first expensive thing I bought entirely for myself. It was not flashy by luxury standards, but it was elegant, powerful, and quiet. I chose the deep blue paint because it looked almost black at night. My mother called it unnecessary. My father asked whether I was trying to impress people. Grant asked to borrow it before I had made the second payment. I said no. He laughed, as though I had misunderstood the relationship between us. The sedan disappeared 7 months later from the secured parking garage beneath my office. The security camera covering my section had gone offline for maintenance. The exit camera recorded a dark vehicle leaving behind a delivery van, but the plate was unreadable. There was no broken glass, no debris, just an empty space and a pale rectangle where the tires had kept the concrete dry. The responding officer asked whether anyone else had access to my spare key. No, I said. That answer bothered me before I finished saying it. The spare key had been in a small fireproof box in my home office. Grant had been in my apartment 2 weeks earlier during our mother's birthday dinner. He said he needed somewhere quiet to take a business call. I had found the office door partly open afterward. When I asked what he was doing, he said he had been looking for a phone charger. I mentioned that to the police. Grant denied touching the key. My mother called within an hour. "How could you even suggest that?" she asked. I told the officer who had recently been in the room. "You pointed suspicion at your own brother." I answered a question. "You always hide behind technicalities." That was one of her favorite accusations. Technicalities were what she called facts that refused to flatter her. The insurance company began its process. The manufacturer activated the tracking system, but whoever had the car knew enough to interfere with it. The signal appeared briefly, then vanished. Each time it returned, I recorded the location, time, direction, and duration. I created a map. The route formed a loose circle around the eastern side of the city. One location was an auto-detailing warehouse. Another was a fenced lot registered to a company called Halcyon Asset Logistics. The name meant nothing to me at first. 3 days after the theft, I received a call from Grant. He sounded offended rather than concerned. "Mom says you gave the police my name?" I gave them a list of people who had recently been near the spare key. "You know how that sounds?" "Yes." He was silent. Then he softened his voice. "Jules, I'm trying to build something. I have investors. People search my name. An accusation could destroy me. I didn't accuse you. You didn't protect me either." There it was. In our family, protection had never meant shielding someone innocent. It meant absorbing consequences for someone more important. "I need you to call the detective," he said. "Tell him you were upset and confused." I wasn't either. "You're really going to do this?" "Do what?" "Choose a car over your family." I wrote down the exact sentence after we hung up, not because I expected to use it. Because I had learned that people revealed themselves most clearly when they believed words left no paper trail. The signal returned that evening near a row of repair shops. I drove there in a rental car and stayed across the street. I never saw my sedan. But I saw Grant's black SUV leave the alley behind the buildings. He did not see me. The next morning, I searched public business records. Halcyon Asset Logistics had been formed 14 months earlier. Its registered organizer was a corporate filing service. Its mailing address belonged to a private mailbox, but the annual report listed an authorized manager, Grant Rowan. I stared at the screen until the letters stopped looking like my brother's name and became what they actually were, a documented connection. I ordered a certified copy of the filing. Then I searched county court records. Halcyon had been sued twice by lenders. Both cases had been dismissed after payment arrangements. Grant's primary company, Rowan Strategic Development, had 3 outstanding judgments and a tax lien. Online, he was flourishing. He posted photographs from hotel lobbies and private dining rooms. He stood beside expensive cars with captions about discipline. Our mother shared every post. The paperwork told another story. Grant was sinking, and my car had become useful. The officer in his garage that night asked Grant to explain. Grant said he had received a call from a man who claimed to have found the sedan abandoned near one of Halcyon's storage properties. "Why didn't you contact your sister?" the officer asked. "I was trying to verify it first. With the plates removed, I found it like that. And the headlight? Same." The officer pointed toward a metal workbench. My license plate lay beneath a rag. Beside it sat the missing chrome emblem and a plastic case containing electronic key programming equipment. Grant looked at me. I watched him calculate, then his shoulders lowered. "Julia," he said quietly, "can we speak alone?" "No, please." "No." The officer requested identification. Grant reached toward his back pocket, then stopped. His eyes moved past us toward the street. A vehicle was approaching. My parents' silver SUV turned into the driveway. They had left their award banquet early because Grant had failed to arrive for the family photograph. My mother stepped out wearing a floor-length green dress and a gold shawl. My father followed in a tuxedo, still carrying the engraved glass award for uncommon integrity. My mother took in the police cruiser, the open garage, my damaged car, and Grant's stained hands. Then she looked at me. "What have you done?" "Not to him. To him," she said later, but her first question was for me. "What have you done?" The officer explained that my stolen vehicle had been recovered from Grant's locked garage. My mother barely glanced at the car. There must be a reasonable explanation. My father asked Grant if he had called his lawyer. Grant said nothing. I had never seen him silent under pressure before. It frightened me more than anger would have. My mother stepped closer. "Julia, tell the officer this is a family misunderstanding. The car was stolen. Grant was trying to help. The plates were under his workbench. You don't know why. The programming device is beside them." Her expression hardened. "We are receiving a civic leadership award tonight. There are reporters at that banquet." The officer looked from her gown to my half-disassembled car. For the first time, embarrassment reached her face. Not shame, embarrassment. She lowered her voice. "You need to think very carefully about what happens next. I already have. Your brother's reputation is tied to all of us. My car is registered to me. This is bigger than a car." She was right, but not in the way she meant. Grant was arrested that night on suspicion of vehicle theft, possession of stolen property, and evidence tampering. My father posted his bond before sunrise. By noon, my mother had published a statement online saying Grant had heroically recovered a family member's missing vehicle and was cooperating to correct a bureaucratic misunderstanding. She did not name me. Within an hour, relatives began sending messages. Why would I involve police? Why had I embarrassed my parents during such an important weekend? Couldn't this have been handled privately? I saved every message. 2 days later, Grant's attorney sent me a proposed statement. It said I had given Grant permission to retrieve the sedan after it was located by one of his contractors. It said I had forgotten the conversation because of stress. It said the parts were removed to prevent the vehicle from being identified and stolen again. The statement included a signature line. My mother called that evening. "Sign it," she said. "It isn't true. It doesn't need to capture every detail. That is what a statement is for. Your brother could lose everything. He used my key. You cannot prove that. Not yet." The silence on the line sharpened. Then she said something I had never forgotten. You have always resented the fact that he was destined for more. I looked around my apartment. At the shelves, I had installed myself, the framed professional certification above my desk, the repaired wooden table that had belonged to my grandmother, the quiet life I had built without applause. "What is he destined for?" I asked. She hung up. The next morning, I examined the purchase documents for my sedan, not because the ownership was in doubt. Because Grant's attorney had attached a photocopy of a vehicle consent form that supposedly authorized Halcyon Asset Logistics to transport and store the car. The signature resembled mine. The date was 6 months old. The form included the sedan's identification number. That number was not visible through casual observation. It had to come from my registration, insurance documents, purchase records, or the dashboard plate. I enlarged the signature. The slant was close. The spacing was not. Whoever signed it had copied my name from a formal document rather than from the way I signed casually. I requested the original through the detective. Then I examined the notary block. The seal belonged to a notary named Simone Pike. I recognized the name. She had notarized several property documents for Grant's companies. A public search showed her commission had expired 3 weeks before the form was dated. The document was not merely false. It was clumsy. That almost offended me. I sent my findings to the detective with a concise summary and supporting records. By the end of the week, the case widened. Police searched Halcyon's storage property. They found parts from 6 vehicles, 3 altered identification plates, blank title forms, and a printer used to create temporary registrations. They also found a folder bearing my name. Inside were copies of my driver's license, insurance card, vehicle purchase agreement, apartment lease, and 1 page from the closing file of a townhouse I had nearly purchased the previous year. The papers had not all come from my home office. Some had come from my workplace. That realization changed the shape of the betrayal. I reviewed access logs at the title company. Grant had visited me twice in the previous year. Both times, he had signed in at reception. On the second visit, I had been called into an emergency meeting and left him alone near my desk for 12 minutes. Our building access records showed my credentials had opened the file archive during that period. I had not entered the archive that day. Someone had copied my badge. The archive contained documents from hundreds of transactions. Names, addresses, signatures, identification records, wire instructions. My stomach turned cold. I notified our compliance director immediately. By the end of the day, internal security had identified unauthorized access associated with 3 files connected to Grant's businesses. 1 involved a vacant commercial property. 1 involved a widow selling her home. The 3rd involved my parents' house. That file contained a recently recorded home equity lien for $640,000. The borrower's signatures belonged to my parents, or appeared to. When I called my father, he refused to discuss it. "We handled a private financial matter," he said. "With Grant, that is none of your concern. It becomes my concern when forged documents came through my office. No one forged anything. Did you sign the lien?" He paused. My answer arrived inside the silence. "Dad, your mother and I authorized Grant to manage certain assets. That isn't what I asked. You are turning this into a crusade." "Did you sign?" He ended the call. The detective obtained the original loan package. My parents had not signed it. Grant had. The notary was Simone Pike. The proceeds had been wired into Halcyon's account, then divided among creditors, luxury leases, and a planned charity development project that existed mostly on social media. My parents had discovered the lien months earlier. They had not reported it. Instead, Grant convinced them that publicity would ruin the family name and collapse his businesses. He promised to repay the loan before anyone knew. They protected him. Then he stole my car and used a forged consent form to dismantle it for parts, apparently intending to report that Halcyon had acquired it legally through an abandoned vehicle process. Why my car? Because its components were valuable. Because he had access. And, as he later told investigators, because he believed I would eventually be reasonable. Reasonable meant silent. The criminal case grew slowly. Real cases do. There were interviews, subpoenas, forensic reports, motions, and long periods when nothing seemed to happen. Meanwhile, my parents continued performing happiness. They rescheduled the leadership banquet photograph and posted it without Grant, explaining that he had been delayed by an urgent business matter. My chair remained behind the column. I did not attend. 3 months later, Grant announced the largest project of his career, a luxury redevelopment partnership that would transform an old waterfront warehouse into an arts and event center. The project launch would take place at my parents' 35th anniversary gala. The invitation described it as a celebration of legacy, community, and family leadership. My mother called me personally. "You will attend," she said. "Why? Because your absence will create questions. Questions already exist, not among the people who matter." I thought about that sentence for several days. People who matter. In my mother's world, authority came from attention. In mine, authority came from jurisdiction, ownership, and signed orders. 2 weeks before the gala, my company received a title request related to the warehouse project. The property was being presented as collateral for a new commercial loan. I was not assigned to the file, but our compliance director included me because of the open fraud investigation. The ownership history contained a problem. The warehouse did not belong to Grant's development company. It belonged to a charitable trust. The trust document prohibited sale, transfer, or collateralization without approval from its 7-member board. The submitted authorization included 7 signatures. One trustee had died 8 months earlier. Another lived overseas and had not entered the country in 2 years. A third signature belonged to Judge Amelia Rourke, a retired probate judge known for reviewing every document personally. I had met her once at a professional conference. She signed her name with a distinctive backward hook on the final letter. The submitted signature did not have it. I called the trust's attorney. Within 24 hours, the board confirmed that no vote had occurred. The authorization was forged. The lender froze the transaction, but agreed not to announce the reason while investigators prepared warrants. The anniversary gala was still scheduled to proceed. So was Grant's project launch. My mother called again, her tone had changed. She was warm now, almost tender. "Julia, I know things have been difficult. That is one description. We want to move forward." "Toward what?" "Grant is prepared to forgive the way you handled the car situation." I closed my eyes. There are moments when manipulation becomes so pure it almost deserves professional admiration. "He is prepared to forgive me. He understands you were frightened. My car was in his garage. We are not revisiting that." "Then why did you call?" She took a slow breath. "We need the family together at the gala. Judge Rourke will be there, trustees, lenders, reporters. Your presence would show confidence." There it was, not love, not reconciliation. Confidence. I was still part of the frame. They needed the scapegoat smiling at the edge so the center looked legitimate. "I'll attend," I said. She sounded relieved. "Wear something soft." Nothing severe. The gala was held in the unfinished warehouse Grant claimed he was transforming. The developers had draped the exposed brick with fabric and placed amber lights along the steel beams. White orchids hid cracks in the concrete. A string quartet played near a wall where water stains had been covered by a projection of the city skyline. Appearances had been applied in layers. My parents stood beneath a gold anniversary sign greeting donors. Grant wore a midnight blue tuxedo and moved through the room with the confidence of a man who believed paperwork could always be changed later. My mother smiled when she saw me. Then she looked at my dress. Dark gray, simple. "Couldn't you have worn color?" I did. "Gray is a color." She adjusted my shoulder as though I were still 10. "Please don't be difficult tonight." I carried a slim black document case. Her eyes dropped to it. "What is that?" "Work. You brought work to our anniversary?" I brought the reason I came. Before she could respond, a photographer called for the family. Grant stepped between our parents. I was placed at the end. The photographer lifted his camera. My mother whispered, "Smile." I did not. The flash went off anyway. Then Grant took the stage. He spoke about vision, legacy, trust. He thanked our parents for teaching him that a family name was the first asset we inherit and the last one we leave behind. People applauded. I watched Judge Rourke from across the room. She sat at a front table with two other trustees and the trust's attorney. Grant announced that he would sign the redevelopment agreement publicly as a symbol of transparency. That was the word he chose: transparency. An assistant carried a leather folder onto the stage. The lender's representative stood nearby, unaware that his institution's fraud unit had already contacted investigators. Grant uncapped a pen. I walked toward Judge Rourke. My mother noticed first. She left the side of the stage and intercepted me near the front tables. "Sit down," she whispered. "I need to deliver something." "Not now. Especially now." She gripped my wrist. Not hard enough to leave a mark. Hard enough to remind me of every childhood photograph in which her fingers had positioned my shoulders. "Do not ruin this family," she said. I looked at her hand until she released me. Then I continued walking. I did not approach the stage. I did not interrupt Grant. I placed the black document case in front of Judge Rourke. Inside were certified copies of the trust agreement, the false board authorization, proof of the deceased trustee's date of death, travel records for the overseas trustee, the lender's freeze notice, and a forensic comparison of the submitted signatures. On top was a letter from the trust's attorney advising the trustees not to execute or acknowledge any agreement connected to Grant's project. Judge Rourke read the first page, then the second. She did not gasp. She did not call for security. She simply raised one hand. The trust's attorney stood. Grant was still speaking. Judge Rourke walked to the stage. The room quieted gradually, table by table. Grant smiled when he saw her, assuming she was joining the presentation. She stepped beside the lender's representative and spoke too softly for most of the room to hear. But I saw the representative's face change. He closed the leather folder. Grant reached for it. The man moved it away. The microphones remained live. "What is this?" Grant asked. Judge Rourke answered calmly. "This property is not yours to pledge." The sentence traveled farther than shouting would have. The lender's representative stepped off the stage. The trust attorney asked the event coordinator to stop the presentation. Two trustees began reading the documents. Guests leaned toward one another. Phones appeared. My mother stood perfectly still near the front table. My father stared at me with naked disbelief, as though he had just discovered the scenery could testify. Grant came down from the stage. He did not raise his voice. Neither did I. "You did this," he said. "No," I looked toward the document case. "You did. I preserved it." Two investigators entered through the rear doors with uniformed officers. They had timed their arrival for the attempted execution of the fraudulent agreement. Grant looked past me toward our parents. My mother shook her head slowly, not denying the facts but rejecting the image of them. The officers escorted Grant into a side corridor. No one applauded. That would have made the moment simpler. Instead, hundreds of people watched in silence as the version of my family they had been shown separated from the version recorded on paper. The anniversary projection continued glowing above the stage. 35 years, legacy, integrity. Then the event coordinator turned it off. The legal consequences unfolded over the following year. Grant pleaded guilty to multiple counts involving vehicle theft, forgery, identity fraud, fraudulent liens, and attempted financial deception. Additional victims were identified through the records seized from Halcyon's storage site. He received a prison sentence, restitution obligations, and a prohibition against managing certain financial entities after release. Simone Pike lost her commission and faced charges of her own. My parents avoided criminal prosecution because investigators could not prove they had participated in the original forgeries. But documented reality reached them anyway. The fraudulent lien on their house triggered litigation. Legal fees consumed much of their savings. They sold the house and moved into a smaller property outside the city. The civic organization quietly withdrew their leadership award. My mother deleted her social media accounts for 6 months. When she returned, she posted photographs of flowers, sunsets, and vague quotations about surviving betrayal. She never named the person she believed had betrayed her. She did not need to. Several relatives stopped speaking to me. Others apologized privately but would not defend me publicly. That taught me something useful. Some people do not support truth. They support whichever version creates the least inconvenience. My company promoted me to Senior Fraud Compliance Manager after the investigation concluded. I helped create new access controls and document verification procedures based partly on the weaknesses Grant had exploited. My insurance settlement covered most of the loss on the sedan. The police returned what remained of it, but I could not bear to repair it. I sold it to a restoration specialist and bought a modest used car with excellent safety ratings and no emotional history. The only piece I kept was the original ownership certificate. It had been returned with the evidence. The page was creased and marked with an exhibit sticker, but my name was still there. Owner, a plain word, a powerful one. 2 years after the gala, I moved into a small cottage near a lake. There is no dramatic gate, no marble entrance, no room designed for photographs. I have a desk beside the window, shelves filled with books, and a deep blue ceramic mug I use every morning. On cold evenings, I sit beneath a knitted blanket and listen to rain touch the roof. My life is quieter now, not empty. Quiet. There is a difference. My mother occasionally sends holiday cards addressed in my father's handwriting. Grant sent one letter from prison. It began with an explanation and ended with a request. I filed it. I did not answer. People sometimes ask whether exposing my brother was worth losing my family. The question assumes I had not already lost them. It assumes a family remains intact simply because everyone keeps standing inside the same photograph. But a frame cannot create loyalty. A caption cannot establish innocence. And love that requires you to deny documented reality is not love. It is an arrangement. So here is what I learned. Keep the messages. Read what you sign. Notice who becomes angry when you ask for clarity. And when someone tells you that protecting the family means hiding the truth, look closely at what they are actually protecting. It may be the name. It may be the money. It may be the picture they have sold to the world. But it is probably not you. Sometimes peace begins the moment you stop trying to fit inside someone else's frame. Sometimes justice arrives without shouting. A sealed envelope. A certified copy. A quiet walk across a crowded room. Then the paper reaches the right hands, and the truth, finally, owns itself.